And tonight, the vault is open.
Five men parked their car on the side of a mountain road. They turned off the engine. They left the keys inside. They left their phones inside. They left their wallets inside. And then they walked into the mountains and didn't come back. No note, no signal, no explanation anyone has been able to find. They were discovered 7 months later, all five of them, in a location that search teams had already covered twice. The medical examiner's report listed cause of death as exposure. The investigation was closed 6 weeks after the bodies were found. I have never been satisfied with that conclusion. I spent 8 months pulling at this case. I talked to the families. I read the full forensic report. I found the details that the official investigation acknowledged and quietly set aside. This case has a clean official explanation: exposure, disorientation, a tragic accident in difficult terrain. But there are things inside the file that don't belong in a story about 5 men who simply got lost. This is what I found. Chapter 1: The drive that didn't end where it was supposed to roost. The 5 men were not strangers. They had known each other for between 8 and 22 years. They were not a random group. They were not a club or an organization. They were just 5 people who had built a friendship over time and maintained it the way adult friendships usually survive. Dinners, group chats, an annual camping trip every September. This was the annual camping trip. Their names were annual: Marcus, Ray, Theo, and Paul. I'm using first names only. The families asked me to. I'm going to respect that. Daniel was 44th. He organized the trip every year. He booked the site. He coordinated the carpooling. He sent the group chat reminder 2 weeks in advance without fail. His wife described him as the one who made sure things actually happened. Marcus was 41st, former military. 2 tours. Worked in logistics after he came back. His sister said he was the most physically capable person she'd ever known. She said if 5 men were going to get lost in the mountains, Marcus was the last one she would have expected to be among them. Ray was 46th, high school science teacher. The cautious one, according to everyone who knew him. He brought the first aid kit every year. He checked the weather 3 days in advance. He kept a paper map in his pack, because he didn't trust GPS signals in remote areas. Theo was 39th, the youngest. Worked in construction management. Quiet, according to his wife. Observant. The kind of person who noticed things before other people did. Paul was 44th, an accountant. He had missed the previous 2 annual trips because of work. This was the first time in 3 years he'd been able to join them. 5 men. Between them military training, outdoor experience, safety awareness, physical fitness, and a paper map. They left on a Friday morning in late September. The campsite was booked. It was a designated site in the national forest. They had stayed there before, twice. They knew the access road. They knew the terrain. The drive from the city was 4 hours. Routine. The access road added another 40 minutes. They never reached the campsite. The highway patrol officer found their car at approximately 6 p.m. that Friday evening. It was parked on the shoulder of a county road, not the access road to their campsite. A different road, 12 miles from where they were supposed to turn off. The car was locked. All personal items were inside. 5 phones, 5 wallets. The car keys were not inside the vehicle. They were on the roof, placed there deliberately. All 5 sets of keys, in a row. The officer ran the plates. The registration came back clean. He noted the car in his log and moved on. It wasn't unusual for hikers to park on county roads. The keys on the roof were slightly unusual. He noted it. He didn't escalate it. That was Friday at 6 p.m. By Monday morning, Daniel's wife had filed a missing persons report. She had tried calling his phone all weekend. It went straight to voicemail every time. She told the investigator Daniel always called on the first night, every single year, without fail. He'd call to tell me they made it. When I didn't hear from him Friday night, I knew something was wrong. The investigation began Monday afternoon. The car was impounded and processed. Everything inside was cataloged. The phones were examined. The last outgoing calls from all 5 devices were placed Friday morning before they left the city. No calls after that. No messages. No GPS activity after approximately 11 a.m. Friday, which meant the phones had been turned off. Not lost signal. Turned off. All 5 of them. Within a window of roughly 20 minutes of each other. Based on the last confirmed location data from the phones, they turned them off somewhere on the county road. Before they parked the car, they were already on that road. Already 12 miles from their intended route, before they switched everything off. That detail matters. They didn't get lost and end up on the wrong road. They were already on the wrong road before they went dark. Whatever changed their direction happened before 11 a.m. Friday. The search began Tuesday. The terrain around the area where the car was found was dense forest leading into high elevation ridgelines. Difficult but not extreme. The kind of landscape an experienced hiker could navigate. Especially one with a paper map. Ray had the paper map. It was found in the car. In his pack. Still there. He left without it. The initial search covered the most accessible terrain within a 5-mile radius of the vehicle. Teams went out Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Nothing. A second expanded search ran the following week. Drone coverage. K9 units. Nothing. The case moved from active search to passive monitoring, which is the official way of saying they stopped looking as hard. The families were told to prepare for the possibility that the men had gone into terrain too difficult to search comprehensively, that they might not be found until spring, or later. Daniel's wife told me that conversation with the investigator was the worst moment of the entire experience. Worse than the call she eventually got 7 months later. She said at least the second call had an ending. The car sat in impound. The case stayed open. And the mountains kept whatever they had taken. For 7 months. Chapter to what the search team found. The location where they were found is something I've had to think carefully about how to describe. Because the description in the forensic report is clinical. Coordinates. Elevation. Terrain classification. Distance from the nearest trail. But the 2 search team members I spoke to described it differently. They described a place that shouldn't have been reachable by 5 men without equipment. Without a map. Without any of the gear that was still sitting in their cart 12 miles away. The elevation was 9,400 feet. Late September at that altitude in those mountains means temperatures that drop to single digits at night. The men were at rest for a September camping trip at a designated site with facilities. Not for high altitude exposure. They were found in a small depression between 2 ridgelines. A natural shelter of sorts. Large rocks on 3 sides. The depression was not visible from any trail. It was not visible from above. The drone coverage during the second search had passed directly over that area without flagging it. The search team that found them in April was following a drainage pattern looking for any sign of movement from the previous fall. One of the team members, a woman named Sarah, who has been doing wilderness search and recovery for 11 years, stepped off the drainage line to check a rocky outcropping. She found them from 8 meters away. She told me my first thought was that they had built something. It took me a moment to understand what I was looking at. They hadn't built something. Not exactly, but they had arranged things. The 5 men were found in a specific configuration. Not scattered. Not in the positions you'd expect from 5 people who had simply stopped moving from cold and exhaustion. They were seated, all 5 of them, in a rough circle, facing inward. Sarah said the positioning was deliberate. She said in 11 years of wilderness recovery she had never seen anything like it. They sat down together, at the same time, in the same direction. That doesn't happen by accident. The forensic report confirmed the positioning. It classified it as a notable configuration, and noted that it was consistent with a coordinated decision to shelter in place. The report did not elaborate further on what coordinated meant in this context. I called the lead forensic investigator. She declined to comment beyond the report. I called the medical examiner. Same response. The cause of death for all 5 men was listed as exposure. Hypothermia. Consistent with the conditions in the timeline. No evidence of trauma. No evidence of any external cause. The toxicology panel was standard for this type of case. It returned clean. No substances. Nothing that would explain why 5 men with combined outdoor experience, military training, and a history of responsible trip planning walked 12 miles off their intended route. Turned off all their phones, left their keys on the roof of their car, and climbed to 9,400 feet without their gear. But here's the detail that the forensic report included in the official investigation set aside. Ray's hands. Ray was the science teacher, the cautious one, the one who always brought the first aid kit. The one who left his paper map in the car. His hands showed evidence of significant activity in the hours before his death. Not defensive wounds. Not injury from a fall. The forensic term is purposeful abrasion consistent with sustained manual contact with rock surfaces. He had been touching the rocks for a long time, moving his hands across the rock surfaces of the depression where they were found. The forensic report noted this. It suggested possible delirium from exposure, causing repetitive behavior. Possible. The second detail is the positioning again. Specifically one element of it that Sarah mentioned and that appears in a single line of the forensic report before the subject is dropped entirely. They were seated in a circle, facing inward, toward a central point. At that central point, there was nothing. The forensic team documented the ground surface at the center of the circle. Standard rock and soil. No objects, no markings, no physical evidence of anything. But Sarah told me something the forensic report doesn't mention. She said when she stepped into the depression and approached the circle, she stopped walking, involuntarily. She said it was not a decision she made. Her body stopped before her mind caught up. She stood there for what she described as a full minute, just standing, not moving. She said, I've done recoveries in avalanche sites, in drownings, in falls. I've seen things that stay with you, but I have never in my career had a physical, involuntary response to a location before I even understood what I was looking at. I asked her what it felt like. She said like I had interrupted something, like I had walked into the middle of something that was still happening. I asked her to clarify what she meant by still happening. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, I don't know how to explain it more precisely than that. I've tried. That's the most accurate thing I can say. I've spent 8 months with this case. That is the sentence I keep returning to. Like I had walked into the middle of something that was still happening. 7 months after 5 men sat down in a circle at 9,400 feet and didn't get up again. Something was still happening. Chapter 3: What the record shows and what it doesn't. I want to start with what is confirmed. The 5 men left the city on a Friday morning. They were on the wrong road before 11 a.m. Then they turned off their phones within a 20-minute window of each other. They placed their keys on the roof of the car. They walked into the mountains without their gear. They were found 7 months later at 9,400 feet, seated in a circle. Cause of death: exposure. That is the official record. That is what is confirmed and documented. Now I want to tell you what the official record doesn't address. The first thing is the road itself. The county road where the car was found is not a logical wrong turn from the route they were taking. I drove both roads. I timed them to end up on that county road from the highway they were on. You have to make 3 deliberate turns, not 1 wrong turn. 3. Each one taking you further from your intended destination. Each one requiring a decision. Ray had been to this campsite twice before. Daniel had been 4 times. Marcus had been every year for 8 years. They knew the route. 3 deliberate turns in the wrong direction is not a navigation error. It is a navigation choice. I went back to the phone records, specifically the window between when they left the city and when the phones were turned off. In that window, there were no incoming calls to any of the 5 numbers that couldn't be identified and explained. No calls from unknown numbers. No unusual contact. But there was one detail the original investigation noted and did not follow up on. At 10:43 a.m., Daniel's phone received a text message. The message came from a number that was registered to a prepaid SIM card purchased in cash at a convenience store in a city 3 states away, 6 weeks before the trip. The content of the message was 3 words. The investigation report lists the message content as you'll understand soon. The number was never traced to an individual. The phone that sent it was never found. The investigation noted the message as potentially significant and then moved to the next item in the report. I called the lead investigator directly. I asked why that message wasn't pursued further. He said it was pursued. We hit a dead end. I asked what kind of dead end. He said the kind where there's nothing left to follow. I asked if he believed the message was connected to what happened. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I believe 5 men made a series of decisions that day that I cannot explain with the information available to me. Whether that message influenced those decisions, I genuinely don't know. That's a careful answer. A very careful answer. I want to tell you about something the families described independently of each other, without coordination, without knowing I had spoken to the others. 4 of the 5 families mentioned the same thing. In the weeks before the trip, something was different about their person. Daniel's wife said he was quieter than usual. Not sad, not distracted, just interior. Like he was processing something she didn't have access to. Marcus's sister said he called her 3 days before the trip. They spoke for 2 hours. She said he kept asking her questions about their childhood, specific memories, things they hadn't talked about in years. She said it felt like he was trying to make sure she remembered them too. Ray's wife said he reorganized his study the week before the trip. Completely. Threw things away he'd kept for years. She asked him why. He said he just wanted things to be clear. Thea's wife said he told her something the night before he left. She said he came into the kitchen while she was making dinner and stood behind her for a moment. And then he said, "I just want you to know that everything I've done, I did because I thought it was right." She turned around to ask him what he meant. He was already walking out of the room. Paul's family didn't describe anything unusual, but Paul had been absent from the group for 3 years. Whatever changed in the weeks before the trip, Paul may not have been part of it. For men, for families, for separate descriptions of the same thing. Something shifted before they left. Something internal. Something that felt, to the people closest to them, like a kind of preparation. Not for a camping trip, for something else. The last documented piece of information I want to give you is about the location itself. I hired a geographical researcher to look at the depression where the men were found. Not the forensic analysis, the history of the location. What she found took 3 weeks to compile because most of the relevant records were not digitized. The depression at 9,400 feet on that ridgeline appears in the separate historical documents. The first is a survey record from 1887, a geological survey of the mountain range. The surveyor noted the depression and described it as a peculiar formation inconsistent with the surrounding terrain. He noted that his compass gave an irregular reading at that location. He moved on without further investigation. One compass irregularity, in 1887. The second document is for 1943, a Forest Service report on a search operation for a missing hunting party. 3 men had gone into the mountains in October of that year and hadn't returned. They were found the following spring, at the same depression, at 9,400 feet. Seated. The report says arranged in a manner suggesting deliberate positioning. Cause of death exposure. The 1943 report is 7 pages long. The description of the positioning takes up 4 lines. Then the subject is dropped and the report moves to administrative matters. I sat with that document for a long time. 3 men in 1943. 5 men in the present case. Same location. Same elevation. Same month. Same cause of death. Same positioning. 80 years apart. The 1943 case was closed as an accident. There was no follow-up investigation into the location itself. The depression doesn't appear in any subsequent Forest Service documentation. It's as if once the report was filed, everyone agreed not to look at it again. Chapter for the thing I can't account for. I drove to that mountain. I didn't go up to 9,400 feet. I'm not going to pretend that was a research decision. It wasn't. I sat at the base of the access road for a while. I looked up at the ridgeline. I thought about 5 men who knew that route, who made 3 deliberate wrong turns, who placed their keys on the roof of their car in a neat row and walked away from everything that would have kept them safe. I thought about Ray leaving his paper map in the car. Ray who checked the weather 3 days in advance. Ray who always brought the first aid kit. Ray who didn't trust GPS in remote terrain. He left the map, deliberately. The same way the keys were placed deliberately. The same way the phones were turned off deliberately. They weren't lost. They knew exactly where they were going. The criminal psychologist I consulted on this case has worked with the FBI on missing persons investigations for 19 years. I'm not going to name her. She asked me not to. I described the case to her without telling her about the 1943 report. I wanted her read on the behavior pattern before I introduced that information. She said what you're describing is coordinated. 5 people making the same decision at the same time, in the same direction, with the same level of apparent intentionality. That level of coordination without any prior documented agreement is extremely rare. I asked what could produce that kind of coordination. She said shared belief. shared experience, or shared instruction. I asked her to explain shared instruction. She said someone, or something, told them what to do, and they followed. I asked what could produce that response in 5 otherwise rational adults with no history of susceptibility to outside influence. She said that's the question I can't answer without more information. Then I told her about the 1943 report. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said that changes the framework of this entirely. I asked how. She said if this is the second time this has happened at the same location, then the location is not incidental. The location is the point. I asked what she meant. She said whatever is happening to these men is not happening on the way there. It's not the drive. It's not the message. It's not the 3 wrong turns. Those are symptoms. The location is the cause. I asked what kind of cause produces this. She said I've spent 19 years working cases that have rational explanations. This case has a rational explanation for every individual element. The message, the wrong turns, the gear left behind, the exposure. Every piece has a box I can put it in. She paused. It's only when you put all the pieces together that there's no box big enough. I've thought about that for a long time. No box big enough. 5 men who knew exactly where they were going. A location that did this once before and was never examined afterward. A 3-word message sent from a phone that doesn't exist anymore. A paper map left deliberately in a car by the man who never trusted GPS. And at 9,400 feet, in a depression between 2 ridgelines. 5 men sitting in a circle around a center point that contained nothing the forensic team could measure or photograph or catalog. The investigation is closed. The case is classified as an accidental death. 5 counts. Closed. The location has no official designation. No warning markers. No restricted access. It's open to rain. Anyone can walk up there. I keep thinking about the 1887 surveyor. The man who noted the compass irregularity and moved on. Who wrote peculiar formation and kept walking. I wonder how many times someone has stood at that depression and felt what Sarah felt. That involuntary stop. That sense of interrupting something. And then turned around and walked back down the mountain. I never told anyone what they felt. Because there's no box big enough for it. The case of the 5 men is officially closed. The families have been left with a cause of death and no explanation for the decisions that led to it. They're not satisfied. None of them are. But there is nothing left open for them to push against. Daniel's wife told me at the end of our last conversation that she goes back to one moment. The Friday morning before he left. He was standing at the door with his pack. She asked him if he had everything. He said yes. He kissed her. He walked to the car. She said he didn't look back. Daniel always looked back. Every single time he left the house. He'd get to the car and turn around and wave. Every time. For 19 years, he didn't look back. Theo's wife still thinks about what he said in the kitchen the night before. Everything I've done, I did because I thought it was right. She told me she spent a long time trying to understand whether that was a goodbye, or an explanation, or something else entirely. She said I've decided it was all 3. That's the version I can carry. I don't know what happened on that mountain. I don't know what the location is or what it does or how it does it. I don't know who sent that message or whether it mattered. I don't know why Ray left the map. What I know is that 5 men got down together at 9,400 feet, in a circle, facing inward, and didn't get up. And 80 years before them, 3 other men did the same thing in the same place. And nobody thought that was worth investigating. If someone you love is planning a trip, ask them where they're going. Look at the route. Make sure they call when they arrive. And if they don't look back when they leave, go after them. Subscribe to William's Vault. New cases every week. I'll see you in the next one.
Tonight's file is closed, but the secrets below never sleep. Subscribe to hold the key to your return. And now, the vault is closed.